All right, the October meeting of the State Water Commission called to order. Do we still need to do quorum? I mean, roll call if we don't have quorum? Okay, let's do the roll call.
Senator Surville.
Here.
Senator Marsden. Senator Stewart. Senator Perry. Here. Senator DeSteff. Delegate Lopez.
Here.
Delegate Bulova. Delegate Hodges.
Here.
Delegate Krizik. Delegate Rasul. Delegate Tran. Here. Delegate Clark. Delegate Laufer. Lamont Curtis. Brian Bayford. Mr. Chair, you do not have a quorum.
Great. Thanks, MJ. Appreciate everybody coming today. Just want to say, first of all, I'm kind of disappointed we don't have a quorum today. We did conduct a roll call to set this meeting date, and we did have sufficient members indicate that they could be present. And in the last, I think, 3 or 4 hours, we've slowly had a number of people announce that they can't come. And we also have several members that want to attend remotely, but remote attendance does not count for quorum. And so we can't take any votes. We can take testimony and hear presentations, but we're not allowed to take any votes today. But I would just mention to the members, I appreciate the ones that are here taking the time to get here today. I would just hope the other members will probably send out an email, understand that they need to reply to our requests for attendance. So we had several members that didn't even respond, and then we have others that said they'd come and didn't, and now we have, looks like about 20, 25, 30 people sitting here. We can't take any votes, which is not nice. So we appreciate you all coming to watch the Water Commission take some testimony today and present us information which will be recorded and Zoomed live. So in light of the lack of quorum, item number 2 on the agenda is legislation that we heard last time about water testing and filtration. Delegate Campbell was not going to come here today. She was going to present her bill by remotely, but given that we can't even vote it, I think we ought to hold off on hearing that until we have enough people here to actually take a vote on whether or not we endorse the legislation or not. I'll just tell the committee the big difference in the bill from last time is that it only focuses on private wells, not local water systems. And the other bill, the prior bill had was for putting people's equipment on taps as opposed to on their well system. In looking at it, some of us thought that putting the equipment on a well was a better way to go rather than putting something on somebody's faucet they can give to somebody else or put on eBay after the state pays for it or whatever. And there's language in our state budget that requires the Department of Health to give us a report on lead and copper and also on the PFAS rule, I think around December the 1st, and we thought it was kind of premature to be setting up a fund or anything until we got that report from the Department of Health. So once we'll probably have that by December. Number 3 on the agenda was approval of the SWIFT budget amendment. We passed an amendment last year asking the state, I think, to explore doing SWIFT up and down the entire Eastern Groundwater Management Area. DEQ has also recommended some monitoring wells. The budget, it was not included in the budget last time. We were just going to re-endorse that concept with the addition of the monitoring wells because we just don't have good data north of Fredericksburg to figure out exactly how to model that aquifer. That's what that one's going to be, and we'll just deal with that next time. So having said that, we are going to take presentations on items 4, 5, and 6, which are private water systems and sewer systems, the cost effectiveness of the Water Quality Improvement Fund, and update on the state water plan of 2020. So why don't we get to number 4, which is the legislative restrictions for private operation of public water and sewer systems. And I think we have somebody from the public who's going to give us a presentation on this, do we have that? Has it been distributed to everybody here? I don't think we have it, presentation in our packet here, do we? I don't see it here. Not here. Somebody was going to come up and present. John J. Albach and Barry Suits. You guys here? Come on up.
Senator, I thought that sounded familiar today.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for coming. Welcome to the Water Commission.
Absolutely. Glad to be here today.
Do you guys have a presentation? Are you going to put it up on the screen? Oh, there it is. Oh, I see. It's that last one. We do have it. It's the one with the island in the first screen.
We do have it, and it's the same cover page I've got. So I think we're off to a good start. I'll just start with an introduction. I'm John Albach, the president of Aqua Virginia, and it's just a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon and have a conversation, perhaps a dialogue, share some ideas back and forth on regulated investor-owned public water and wastewater systems. And My background is civil and environmental engineering, and I spent 32 and a half years with the State Health Department, Office of Drinking Water, and the last 4 years of that was as the director of the Office of Drinking Water, with all the regulatory responsibilities for Virginia. Then I retired and transferred over to the private utility side as the president, and I've been with Aqua Virginia now for 8 years. Barry, why don't you introduce yourself, sir?
Thank you, John. I'm Barry Suits. I'm president of Virginia American Water. Similar to John, I'm a civil engineer by training. Don't hold that engineering piece against me, but love the business. I've worked for American Water for 30 years in the water and wastewater business, and very much have enjoyed a long career providing people with critical service like water service and wastewater service.
Thank you. We'll just flip the page here. As a regulated public utility, all right. I always wonder if I can figure this thing out, hit the right button. But as a regulated public utility, we are regulated. A lot of our regulations are driven by the work with EPA, Department of Environmental Quality, on the wastewater side with our VPDS and VPA permitting that we have, and with the Virginia Department of Health, Office of Drinking Water, and of course with the State Corporation Commission. So we're very robustly regulated on the environmental side of the house, and also the financial side to make sure that our investments are timely, prudent, and useful. Just an oversight for my company, Aqua Virginia. We're in 37 counties within the Commonwealth, serving approximately 106,000 Virginians, about 35,000 total customer counts. We have 8 wastewater treatment facilities. The majority of those all discharge into the Chesapeake Bay, and we've been very active with protecting our bay resources with the nutrient controls there. 370 wells. We also have 2 surface water treatment plants that we operate. Barry?
And Virginia American Water, kind of the counterpart, competitor with Aqua. We've been in Alexandria, so part of our service territory for 170 years. So been around a while in the Commonwealth. We serve about 350,000 people across the Commonwealth. We also, as a company, provide military services, water and wastewater services at military bases. So we have that group that serves both Fort Belvoir and Fort Walker. And then Virginia American Water actually was the very first of those American Water military installations. We serve Fort Gregg Adams now as part of Virginia American Water, based out of our Hopewell operation. So we've been here a long time. Across the bottom, it kind of lines out how we've changed over time. There's been some acquisitions and consolidations, up to most recently Cape Charles just earlier this year, where we bought the water and wastewater system in Cape Charles. So mostly along the eastern side of the state of Virginia at this point, but we're seeing a lot of interest by municipalities that are struggling with their water and wastewater services in other areas of the state. And so that may not be that way forever. But anyway, thank you for having us here, and appreciate the opportunity to tell you who we are.
Yeah, so I just had a question for both of you. So, I live in a neighborhood with 106 houses on a private water system, and we've outsourced to a company that manages it, but doesn't totally work on it. But how much of the people you all represent are municipal systems versus like private networks, or like maybe like HOAs or something like that? I'm trying to get a sense of that split.
No, certainly. For me, it's a mix. I have several small towns on the Northern Neck where we own and operate and provide services to municipal customers there. I've also got a large holding of small subdivisions. One of them is close to 5,000 connections. So, I mean, really, it's a town for all practical purposes. And they're all treated uniquely the same. They all have the same level of problems and concerns and investment needs. So whether it's serving a town like Irvington, or if it's serving an HOA with 40 houses, the regulatory aspect all applies. The infrastructure needs are the same. They're just different orders of magnitude.
Yeah, and we're very similar to what John just mentioned. We have a mix. Our mix is a little smaller, and our smaller systems, like you described, Senator, are on the northern neck as well. We serve about 10,000 people there. Systems as small as maybe 20 or 30 homes on the small end of that. It's a 350-mile trip to make the route around from our 18 water systems we have on the northern neck. But that's really the predominance of where our customers are that are in situations like you described. The rest are in municipalities.
So I would assume that most of the small, I guess the non-municipal systems you all represent are probably, you would call them probably rural, right?
Did you say rural?
Rural, yeah.
I would, and I think they're kind of in a place where some of them are private systems that are regulated by the State Corporation Commission, some aren't. Anything over, is it 15?
50 connections is SCC.
But what is it for the VDH and DEQ?
25 persons.
25 persons. So probably most of the small rural systems you talk about have the same environmental regulations, and then up to 50 before they're supposed to be regulated as a private entity by the SCC.
Got it.
So with that, this is a repeat slide, but I think you'll have already picked up that Barry and I are friends. We're also friendly competitors in the same business. We're after the same goals, and that's protect public health of citizens of Virginia and provide safe, reliable water sources. We're also both in the business of working against each other at some times to purchase municipal systems. And that's a friendly competition, all driven to investing in Virginia, improving the infrastructure, putting people to work with that construction project, and just improving the lives of our Virginians on a daily basis. We touched on everybody's facing the same regulatory environment, whether they're owned by Aqua or whether they're owned by American, or if it's a small town in Southwest Virginia or in the Piedmont, Northern Virginia, they're all facing the same regulatory concerns. I'm going to talk a little bit about these more in detail later, but PFAS, I think, has already been mentioning in your opening, sir, twice at least. PFAS is in the forefront of our minds and has been for a number of years now. The rest of the letters are all related to lead and copper, various regulatory changes of one kind or another. We're focused on getting the lead out, which is a national initiative through various regulatory actions, and investigating that, removing lead service lines. Some cases, as I told somebody here earlier, we're proving a negative. I feel pretty sure I don't have any lead service lines, but we have to invest in the infrastructure to prove that we don't have lead service lines. That can be problematic sometimes when you look at where that money could be going for infrastructure investments, but it's critical that we prove it to ourselves that we don't have a lead service line out there to replace. And if we do, then we need to do it in a timely manner. We're all competing for monies from the federal government, just like municipalities are. We're eligible for the Safe Drinking Water State Revolving Fund through the Office of Drinking Water. So that's a routine opportunity there. Our systems, just like the municipal systems, is facing water loss, also known as non-revenue water. Water main breaks. I drove through here in Richmond this morning coming in, a water line break on Belvedere. Just a reminder that is a daily occurrence in our aging and sometimes failing infrastructures across Virginia and this nation. We're also dealing with inflow and infiltration into our sewer systems, just groundwater infiltrating in through manholes and sewer lines that requires the additional cost of treatment for that. It's how we get this done, how we finance it, and do it in a cost-effective method. The first one here is kind of staggering. Almost 99% of waterworks serve fewer than 100,000 customers. They're all predominantly in Virginia, very small water systems. And then the rest of them are the larger ones. In Virginia, you can see the numbers here. They're a little bit staggering, but overall not too bad, considering there's about 2,800 regulated water systems in Virginia. But compliance with the regulations is a key component that we face every day, just like our municipal owners do, the city of Richmond, and other privately investor-owned companies. The next one down here, ASCE is the American Society of Civil Engineers. For a number of years, they've been grading water systems. Virginia is up to a C+ on water and a D+ on wastewater. 9.4, 6.4, we're about $16 billion there of investment needed. These things have got to be funded. Our companies are part of that investment opportunity. It all goes back into the 1970s with some of the first regulatory actions coming out that really were addressing wastewater treatment, the building of facilities. A lot of our facilities in Virginia, regardless if we own them or American owns them or they're owned by a municipality, date back into the 60s and 70s. They're facing technological challenges. They need updating. They need to be able to comply with current rules. There's a lot of funding that's needed. Thinking that, back in the 70s, over 60% of that was federal dollars, and now we're less than 10. Is it showing the lack of federal dollars? There's a lot of dollars out there that are coming down. I think it's showing the magnitude of the work that has to happen to accomplish this. Resilience.
Back to the number you just cited, the $9.4 billion and the $6.4 billion, at least on the drinking water side, the $9.4 billion shortage, that does not include anything like the projected PFAS or lead and copper.
I don't believe it does, sir.
Right.
And I can't quote those numbers, but our company, and I'm sure Virginia Americans looked at the federal projections on what EPA has projected, the PFAS treatment costs, how it impact water systems. We think they've missed the mark by orders of magnitude. When you really get into looking at the design, the construction, the costs, and the ongoing and enduring operation and maintenance expenses to do this, whatever technologies you're doing. If we're going to use carbon for treatment, it's going to burn out and reach a residual where it's no longer effectively removing PFAS. That now has to be disposed of. That is an additional cost. Then you got to have the replacements coming in. So the projected numbers from EPA, in our opinion, are low. So these numbers are going to grow when that's taken into account.
Well, Fairfax Water told us they were looking at least $1 billion, I think, at their testimony. I think it was last year. And that's just 17% of the states.
Right. And in a year with construction and material costs, they're just going up.
Yeah, very quick question. Considering the amount of money that's going out for replacement of lead pipes and for PFAS and for other lead abatement issues out of the federal infrastructure bills, I mean, what percentage, or can you give me a hard number about how much has come into the Commonwealth and how much has been applied for by the state?
I cannot, sir, but I can take that as a takeaway and try to look into that.
It'd be fascinating to know how that changes the percentages some.
Yeah, I'll take it as a due out, sir, and look into that. So along with all those, alphabet letter contaminants and things we're working with, there's the basics. We have to make sure our water and wastewater systems are resilient, whether it's my company or Barry's or municipalities. Backup power sources, generators. We're blessed with a good electric grid here in Virginia until it's your system and your household that goes down, right? And you need backup generation. And when it happens on the northern neck, Delegate Hodge, some of our systems out there, we've been working over the years to put in permanent backup power right there at those facilities based on their risk. Others I know go out occasionally or hardly ever at all. So we have the abilities to roll in a portable generator and take care of business there. So that's all part of this risk management and resilience that Barry and I both do with our systems across the country. Facility hardening against weather impacts. We got to look at weather. We've had 2 recent incidences here of extreme weather events on the East Coast that drives home the need for planning and response actions. And I think that's just going to continue. Those take away dollars that are needed for improving systems and catching up. And so we're both working on making sure our emergency response plans are in place that if we have areas that are subject to flooding, we've built flood walls, we've elevated equipment, we've waterproofed equipment where we can, and we have the staffing and the materials to go in quickly and replace and get systems back up and running if you can't prevent a failure.
So I had a question about this. So when Isabel rolled through Northern Virginia about, I think it was in 2011, my neighborhood didn't have electricity for over a week. And because we're a private water system inside the county, we didn't have water for a week. I never knew how important taking a shower was or flushing a toilet until I didn't have water. And as part of their undergrounding program, Dominion recently undergrounded the power lines to my wells in my neighborhood because it was part of their overall undergrounding program that we authorized.
Right.
Are you aware, are they able to sort of preference or rate base sort of, undergrounding lines to the water pumps, the water systems you all have in your system, or is it not preference in any way? They just get treated like every other power line in the system that, so you couldn't
Not knowing the intricacies of the electrical rate base and rate making procedure. Let me take it back to a water system. If we're improving the functionality and serviceability and usefulness for a used and useful purpose, it can go under rate base. So I would think a lot of the older overhead electric lines are probably timing out age-wise for depreciation and reliability. That a replacement of that, I would think, would go into rate making.
No, I get that, but my point is that they're not prioritizing any of your water pumps and your systems for undergrounding so that they're not as susceptible to hurricanes or storms, right?
They're not prioritizing, but we have had we keep in conversations with our power suppliers about their investment plans, their capital plans, and if we've identified a location where we have, say, frequent outages due to trees falling on overhead lines, we prioritize that for generators, but we also want to make sure that if we're doing that we're interconnected, dovetailed in with the local power company, and what are their projections for putting power lines underground so that we're not both solving a problem at the same time.
Just a quick question as well.
Go ahead, Doug Lopez.
Thank you. What you had said a second ago or a little bit ago about how you're trying to protect against issues that you don't know about. You made an allusion to that. The EPA puts out fairly regularly incidences of lead issues or people busting through, like standards. Mm-hmm. And actually NRDC has this amazing website where you can actually see every community, the number of problems they've had, how bad the problems have been. It's fairly significant in poorer communities, older communities across the Commonwealth, especially in Southside, Southwest Virginia, where you have older homes, lead pipes, and so that you'll have a fairly clean system going up to the house. And then it's the house where you have to address some of the lead issues. What part of the process are you involved with the replacement of those lead pipes in those homes through the federal funding programs that are out there right now through the infrastructure bill, or is that another entity that's dealing with that?
All right. So we're with the lead regulations. As the utility provider, we're responsible for the water up to the meter. Uh-huh. And replacing that section of the service line. We're also responsible for replacing the service line from the meter to the foundation wall of the house where it goes into their shutoff valve. After it goes on to the personal property within the house, if it's a lead pipe in there or lead solder joints, that's the responsibility of the homeowner under the lead service line replacement program. And so what we're looking at doing is as we're out there looking to see if we had lead service lines, which a lot of my systems were built in the 60s and 70s. So we're kind of outside that window where you would expect to find them. Mm-hmm. But I've been around the industry long enough, things happen. Yeah. And we want to make sure we identify it. As we're actually looking for that, if we find that problem, then we will take the responsibility and the utility will pay to replace the service line.
Thank you, sir.
So I mentioned emergency response and cybersecurity. We have to harden everything. that we own, whether it's a cloud-based or a physical-based structure, and keep that reliability going. So I think somewhere in here, maybe I have talked about infrastructure investment in dollars too many times, but that's what's needed. It is the dollars to pay for this infrastructure. It comes from ratepayers, and we're looking also at the federal loan possibilities. The PFAS mitigation, from the Aquifer Virginia side, and Barry can speak to American. As soon as PFAS became known and they started talking about it at the EPA level, and within Virginia several years ago, legislation was passed to look at whether or not we should implement regulatory responsibility and authority ahead of the federal government. And I was part of that work group, very fortunate and I'm glad to have been on that and serve. Our companies have been looking at PFAS mitigation, taking our own samples, getting a database, looking at the mapping and things that are out there. We're into a second round of sampling right now for confirmation sampling and looking to mitigate. So within the aqua companies, and we're in 8 states, we had set an internal standard to strive for, and now we'll be complying with the federal standard. And we're working toward that. So that's what our companies are facing. Municipalities are facing this. It's competition for dollars. It's also going to be competition for products and being able to get in line with manufacturers of treatment vessels and secure those who are ready to go. Rates have got to keep pace. As we're looking at municipal systems, I know I have seen that municipal rates have not kept up with the pace and the spending so that they can cover a true cost of service. So we're back to some of the things I've already talked about. Try to keep the inflow and infiltration out of the collection system. We don't need to be treating rainwater in our wastewater treatment plants. The chemical costs, the power costs, all add to the O&M, and it's better to keep that out. It also maintains and preserves the capacity for other usages, growth if it happens within that community and is that community's desire to grow. The PFAS, UCMR5 is the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, and this is version 5. So EPA is continually looking at contaminants, potential contaminants to regulate in the future. And so we participate in that sampling effort to identify these. And as new compounds are found, or as the technology increases within the laboratory to look at lower levels of identification, this is a very good program to see where we need to be focusing our time and efforts, our investment dollars, but also our ability to do engineering planning. And that's why I like about Barry also being an engineer. We kind of bring that engineering planning perspective and orderliness to this job of ours. Emerging contaminants. I think there might have been a piece of legislation last year that got carried over related to microplastics. There's a lot out there to be dealt with yet, and we're really just kind of the tip of the iceberg. And at some point, we're dealing with PFAS in drinking water. We're looking at PFAS in wastewater. There's going to be regulatory actions on that, in the future. Aquifer Virginia does not land apply any biosolids, but a lot of municipalities in Virginia do. And I've got a background in working with those programs. It's eventually going to impact the ability for beneficial reuse by our farmers for agriculture, but also the landfill disposal with hazardous waste landfills. So PFAS is going to be around, and it's wide-ranging. I've already mentioned the robust procedure with the State Corporation Commission for our rate making. Everything is extremely very well looked at to make sure that we're compliant with our allowed but not guaranteed returns on equity and how we're spending our customers' money to make sure it's prudent and appropriate. Municipal governments have their own rate-making processes, and interestingly, they can be different whether or not you're an in-town or out-of-town customer, and some of that goes to subsidization. And we're going to move next to a little more interesting aspect of this. We're going to get away from words on pages and go to pictures.
You can
tell I got C's in my engineering classes, so I got the photographs to show you. But anyway, thank you, John, and I do get to show just a little bit. Which button moves it forward?
To the right side.
Okay. Just a few examples of some of the kinds of infrastructure investments that are, needed, that have ramped up pace because of their age. Water systems are only about 170 years old. I mean, that's when they first started. So, pipe lasts 100 years, 75 to 100 years. So, many systems that were built 75 to 100 years ago, their pipes need replaced at a quicker pace than what we've been replacing them as a whole, both investor and municipals. This is just an example of what we are challenged with on whether it be a sewer lateral or a sewer main or a water main. We're a lot of times in the street. The other thing you'll notice is that over time, that trench on the left where we make the replacement, the municipality requires full width pavement replacement when we're done. So, that's not for free either, right? That's a cost of the investment to replace a water main, is to restore the pavement to at or better condition than it was when we originally got there. But there's been a lot of focus on water main and sewer main replacement or lining to reduce that I&I that John talks about, or reduce the water loss and main break frequency that old water main can have. And that all interrupts service for customers. A few other examples on the top left, as I'm looking at them, water treatment facilities. That's a new sedimentation basin at our water treatment plant in Hopewell, required by regulations. It's a redundant basin to a sedimentation basin we already have. It's much more highly technical than the old basin, more reliable. It's utilizing plate settlers, takes a smaller footprint, but it's all built around the need to deal with more radical change of water quality in the source water, more resiliency and redundancy in the service we provide, so we're not interrupting service. So that's an example of a water treatment basin that would produce about 18 million gallons of water a day. On the top right is a water tank we're building in Virginia. It's 2.5 million gallon elevated tank. John mentioned earlier the amount of water storage is an issue. So, one of the protections we put in place to provide resilient service is to have more water storage in place to deal with the time you have where you may be interrupted in treatment, either because of a power outage or some other kind of natural disaster or even a mechanical failure. And then on the bottom it's not the greatest picture, but you can see on the left how we used to try to protect ourselves against flooding with some bales and sandbags. We've built hardening of our facilities to protect against a flood on the Appomattox River. You see that 12-foot tall concrete wall there that provides us resiliency so we can operate even in the worst of conditions when there's a flood. All examples of, as John mentioned earlier, the hardening of facilities and resilience. On the northern neck, and this center serval is maybe a little bit bigger than the system you're on, but an example on the left there of a well pump house and a hydromatic tank that serves a smaller subset of customers, maybe 100 or so. We have put a lot of energy into replacing those wells and hydromatic tanks, in part because of new regulation that's protecting those aquifers and the screens in the aquifers and the withdrawal permit process. So that's a well replacement project out on the northern neck. And then the backup power, just a couple examples of what that looks like. And you see a generator at one of our well houses. We've tended to back up power at all of our well houses to assure that, when there's a storm, we're going to have continuous supply. We actually acquired a set of systems in the northern neck called E.L. Goddard last year, and most of them had no backup power. And so now we're going in and adding backup power because that's kind of what we do. The bottom picture is a much larger 2-megawatt generator that can run our whole Hopewell water treatment facility, as I showed earlier. Oops. So you might ask why we're here and why we're interested in talking with you. One of the things that we've, I think, laid out here is there's an extraordinary need for infrastructure dollars in the water and wastewater sector. A lot of times people don't think about it. They may not even think about the fact that private utilities are part of that equation, right? So we serve about 500,000 people in the Commonwealth. There's more municipalities every day that are interested in talking with us. And there's kind of this urgent need for capital, which we can be part of that solution, right? We're not the only solution, but we can be part of it. And one of the reasons we're here is we're really interested in legislation similar to what the gas companies have and have had for about 14 years. It's called the SAVE Act. It's an infrastructure mechanism that allows them to more closely time the investments they make to the recovery. We don't have that in the water and wastewater business. We could really use it, and we tried to lay out the need for investment, but it would do more than just provide for that need for investment and right timing. It provides gradual increases. It doesn't change what we get. It doesn't change how much people pay. It just changes how we get it, right? And it allows it to be more gradual and steady, and it frankly gives more transparency and more scrutiny to the individual projects that we're working on because it's focused only on the capital investment. So, we wanted to introduce ourselves here today, tell you a little bit about who we are, let you know that we have an interest in a piece of legislation that's tried and true, been used in Virginia for many years on the gas side, and we're very interested in something similar on the water and wastewater side.
So I had a couple questions about that. So you mentioned that there's all this lingering need. I assume the reason there's all this need is because nobody wants to raise rates to fund all this infrastructure. I mean, is there no regulator that's looking at these private, not you all, or for that matter, any of these systems to ensure that the actual investments that need to be made are actually happening so that the infrastructure is being updated? I mean, or they just sort of, the only time this stuff gets looked at is when somebody comes along and asks for a rate increase and then they have to justify it. You follow me? I mean,
I do, and I'm going to try to answer that.
I know VDH looks for like contamination and make sure that the water's not, got stuff in it, right? But I would think, is there nobody like saying, hey, this pipe is a ticking time bomb, you need to replace it? Is there nobody that comes in and says, fix the pipe before it blows up, or fix the tank before it rusts out, or that kind of thing? I mean, all this infrastructure upgrades you say needs to happen?
I think there is. VDH and DEQ regulate us on the environmental side. One of the topics John pointed to a bit ago was the number of violations that you see in notices of violation in the water and wastewater sector. I think 600 or something in Virginia. Between the two of us, we've had essentially zero. So when we get notice from VDH or DEQ about a regulation that we need to comply with, we take that to heart, in part because the commission, the State Commerce Commission, requires us to be compliant with the environmental regulators. You're right, people generally don't like to have higher rates, but they really don't like to have a lack of service, as you mentioned earlier with the shower, or a lack of safe, reliable service. They want to trust the water. We're the only utility that somebody ingests, and then when it leaves your home, it goes into the environment where you swim in those water sources. So it's a really big level of trust that the population of the Commonwealth of Virginia puts in water and wastewater operators to provide that service and do it safely. John, if you have something to add.
No, I'll just add that, for Aqua, we're at 100% compliance on the monitoring, and we're just a couple tenths under on the actual compliance with the regulations. So nearly a perfect record for notice of violations, but it's when you're working with 170-some systems, it's hard not to have a minor excursion away from that. These things happen. It's how you resolve it, how quickly you resolve it, and you take care of it, and you take the responsibility for it. But even under the best operations, minor things can happen, but not to the extent that the numbers we're showing with the large numbers that are there. The regulatory climate in Virginia from the drinking water regulations and DEQ are robust. I believe the SCAT regulations are under revision or somewhere in that process. I helped write those back in the day.
When was that?
I was in the late 80s, early 90s. They've been continually moving forward, and it's a great set of regulations for the engineers and the utilities to work with, the guidance that's in there. The inspection program from DEQ on our facilities is robust, as is the inspection programs from drinking water. But more importantly, adding to that, we look at our own facilities, not just for what the minimum code or regulation requires. We look at the standard of care, the standard of practice. We follow and do what's called asset management. And that's what you're getting to, Delegate Lopez, is looking ahead What is the pipe replacement cycle? When does a tank need to be replaced? What's its lifespan? Not just from a depreciation from a financial standpoint, but depreciation on the useful life and needs to be replaced. We look at the American Water Works Associations and the Water Environment Federation guidance and benchmarks on how frequent the professional organizations are showing that, we should have a life cycle replacement on water lines and sewer lines, as well as just the asset management. Preventive maintenance.
Listen, I get the point that if you guys want to keep your customer, you got to keep service going and have it reliable and all that. My question, we don't get to a $9 billion backlog if there's a regulator looking at the pipes and saying, you got to fix that pipe before it explodes, right?
Right.
Right. So, and I think Doug Lopez has a question. And I think Tran has a question too. Lopez first.
You had said that last time you actually helped write the regulations back in the late 80s, but we had the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act reauthorization back in 1995 and 1996. Can you say the state regs were updated at that time as well to comply with the feds?
The Safe Drinking Water Act amendments were from the drinking water side, and I had a hand on writing and implementing those up until the day I retired.
Okay, follow up, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
go ahead, Doug Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm intrigued by the legislative idea you have in terms of sort of replicating the same process we have for the natural gas companies. Can you tell me exactly how much it takes in terms of capital investment to stand up one of these, like a facility for, say, 100,000 person population up front right now?
Upfront original cost?
Original cost, yeah.
No, I don't.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions. That's probably a good ballpark.
Right. And so the idea
So much that
of,
goes into that.
Mr. Chairman, so the idea then of actually putting in place this kind of natural gas system that's in place right now already, having the same kind of process will actually help you be more responsive to localities so that we don't have an issue with lack of service at certain times.
I think the answer is yes.
Okay, Delegate Tran.
How do I speak? Oh,
You're on.
It's amazing by itself. Thank you so much. I think as you're proceeding with
Delegate Tran, are you asking the question, or is it your companion staffer there?
Mr. Chair, I would like to I would be glad to ask a question in here. How would you envision that your legislative proposal will guarantee protections for consumers, though? If you are the only person who says the entity that says we need this type of upgrade, that this upgrade will cost X amount of dollars, and that we want to recoup our investment along a speeded up timeline that makes sense for us as the for-profit company. Thank you. I think you could turn off the mic.
I got kind of caught up in your assistant there. So you're asking was what are the protections for the consumer in all that? And I kind of alluded to that, but I didn't go into great detail, Delegate. Right now, generally, for us to make those kinds of investments, it happens as part of our general base rate cases. And there are a lot of other things we look at then, right? We look at labor, we look at chemicals, we look at power, we look at taxes, we look at all the costs associated with getting capital, interest rates, return on equity. There leaves less time to focus on the project list that's embedded in that overall request. With the mechanisms like the gas companies have, that's the only thing that's being focused on. So there's ability to look into kind of a deeper dive into each individual project, what it does, what it provides, and then that has to be approved by the State Corporation Commission. And so there's an opportunity for the commission itself to look out for the best interests of the customers. We do that, but then the commission, there's the opportunity for all of the customers that we serve to intervene in that process and weigh in as well. So I think, there's actually more scrutiny on the projects that we do through a system like the SAVE Act than in some ways there is under our current, approach of doing it through a base rate application.
Delegate Tran, you got another question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Sir, could you just clarify that your proposal would go through the SEC or not? I thought it didn't, but I was trying to understand following your response if it does or not.
No, absolutely. It would just set up a statutory framework like gas has, but it's still managed through the Virginia State Corporation Commission. So they'd still regulate that, they'd still approve it and manage the process.
Just so I'm clear, what you all think would be helpful would be to try to get a sense of what capital base or whatever you'd be able to rate base before you buy a system so that you can have better be able to project what your financials would be before you acquire it, basically, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's also authority that the gas systems already have, but has not been given, that authority has not been given to you all yet, right?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. It makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know how you'd buy a system if you can't figure out what the financials are going to be before you buy it. It seems to me kind of complicated to figure that out. So
It's a good bill for next year.
yeah, and it's a good bill for next year. Maybe if we have another meeting, we can look at it, the bill.
We can talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for private water guys? No other questions.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. All right, next up, we have Mike Rolban, DEQ Director, here to follow up on the discussion we had last meeting about DEQ's view on the cost effectiveness of our current WQIF fund grants, given all the money we've invested in this stuff over the last, what, decade, 2 decades now? 2 decades. All right, welcome, Director Rolban.
Good afternoon, Senator and members of the commission. I appreciate the invitation, and I enjoyed listening to 2 engineers. I'm another engineer, so hopefully we won't bore you too much today. But I'm going to talk about a few things, and Ariana has called me a couple times, and we talked about what you'd like to hear about today. So the first part we're going to focus on is cost effectiveness and some questions that she asked that I answered today. And then if we have time, we'll talk about ARPA, WQF, SLAF, et cetera. So the questions that she posed on behalf of the commission were basically what legislation, regulation, or guidance would need to be changed to award grants such as WQF and SLAF based on cost effectiveness. And secondly, could we publish the cost effectiveness of our grants for WQF and SLAF grants? And the other big question she asked was, could DEQ review past project approvals and see how they'd look relative to a cost-effective measure? So I'm going to try to answer that. The first part is that, for the WQF, we would need legislation changed to rank these and give the grants out based on a cost-effectiveness criteria. Same thing would happen on the SLAF grants. Okay. However, we wouldn't need any regulatory changes because there's no regulations that actually govern these. We just follow the current law. So that's the answer to the first question that she posed. The second is, what can we do to publish the cost effectiveness of our grants? So not require them, but just publish the information. We don't believe that we need any approvals to do that. We could just do it. We could post on our website. We could give it into a plan that we periodically report. So we're definitely able to do that. The second part, so it's going to give you a bunch of graphs. She asked if we could we go look at our past awards and do some type of cost effectiveness measure. We don't have perfect data. That just warn you right away. But what we did is we took some staff to look at past awards. This is for the SLAF grants, and we used dollars per pound of phosphorus removed per year as the measure. Okay, and that's because that has been the primary criteria in the stormwater grants. And this is a whisker and bar chart. We show the median numbers, and you'll see the dollars have bounced all around, but 95% of them are under 50,000. There's a few outliers that in the 200,000 range, but you're talking in the 5 to tens of thousands of dollars. We then looked at the WQIF grants, and looking at phosphorus again, and you see a huge difference. We'll have a summary table in a second, but you're talking a couple of orders of magnitude. Nitrogen, same type of thing. In these plants, in those 2 facilities, or this type of facility, we have data that separates nitrogen and phosphorus because it's different types of treatment processes. In the SLAF grants, it's one type of process. So this is a summary, okay? And the first thing I want to warn everybody, it's apples to oranges. It's not perfect data. We just haven't been collecting the data. And the biggest thing is that operating costs are not included. And probably in the WQF programs, the operating costs we're ballparking would add in the magnitude of $300, okay, per pound. But even if you do that, you're still looking at an order of magnitude, a tenfold factor difference in cost effectiveness between these two programs. I want to point out this chart real quick that I sent Ariana.
Mike, can you go back to that chart for a second?
Sure.
Yeah, that one. So what's your diagnosis as to why the cost or the amount we're spending per pound of phosphorus has tripled in the 24 cycle, and it went up by like 2.5 times in the 23 cycle, kind of relative to prior years? I mean, the sense I was trying to get was like whether or not we've knocked out all the low-hanging fruit, and that to get the rest of it, we're starting to have to spend a lot more money to get the same juice out of the squeeze on the lemon. So
it appears to be, based on this limited data, that trend is exactly what we're seeing. That so far the projects on average are costing more, which suggests that the cheaper projects have been taken care of.
Right. Well, it suggests it. I just don't know it definitively says that.
Right.
I mean, it's all a question of who applies versus like reality. So
Correct. And so I've espoused this for 30 years, okay, that this is a problem. It's not a new problem. I'll show you another information data point. But what I want to do, what I plan to do, we are in the process of hiring a couple of more staff to work on our trading platform and to work on our in lieu fee platform, which includes nutrient credits. And what we're putting in, and I say we, Jonathan Rock is our chief policy advisor, and he is working on the employee profile to go through the hiring process right now. And we want to hire at least one of the people with a very strong economics and finance background to start getting into this data and, first of all, start collecting better data as we add the applications so that we can do a much more detailed analysis and find out, is it we just are awarding the wrong projects, or have we actually paid for a lot of the cheaper projects? We also have, as you know, pay for performance or pay for outcomes, $20 million package that I'll talk about in a sec, that Delegate Bulova patroned, or it's in the budget, sorry. He's also handling that, and we'll have the same person working on that assessment. And what we're trying to do is actually 60% of the ranking to actually give that money is based on cost effectiveness. We're using nitrogen as the primary factor in the majority of the state, except for the watersheds where there's algae issues, which are primary in freshwater that are primarily driven by the phosphorus. So we're using phosphorus there. So that's out on the street right now. The proposals are due in February, and hopefully we'll be giving $20 million out based on cost effectiveness.
So I'm just trying to understand why is what it looks to me like on the WKF grants, the increases there's no real pattern there.
Correct.
And if anything, any increases could just be inflation or something like that. It's kind of hard to really see a trend there. But why is the per pound average tripled for phosphorus under the SLAF versus under the WKF? It's flat.
We don't know. I mean, this is just the only data that I have available, and this is our analysis. This is what we basically the grants were given. All we have is dollars and pounds, and this is the math.
Okay.
And what we've got to figure out is what's driving it, and I really want to do it. I think the pay for outcomes will help us a lot.
And that chart, we're basically between 14 and 24, 10 years. I mean, how many billions of dollars did we spend?
I'll have that data later.
Roughly,
I mean, 100. I mean, in the SLAF, it's in the hundreds range.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah, it's like 30 to 50 a year, 30 to 40 a year.
Right.
It's big dollars.
Yeah, right. That's why we're talking about it.
Well, let me go on and see this. I just want to show you. This is not a new phenomenon. So in '91, we did a report. I personally did it with Noman Cole. You know the Noman Cole sewage treatment plant. It's before he got
Best
killed.
wastewater plant in Fairfax County.
You got it.
Right in the heart of the 34th district.
So Noman was a friend of mine and helped me write a report that came up with a similar graph that now was redone by the Senate Finance Committee in 2011, which I sent to Ariane as well. It just shows you, again, that this is not unknown, that SLAF grants are primed for stormwater. It's much more expensive than wastewater, an order of magnitude or more. So it's not a new phenomenon. The next thing I just want to show you is the first year I was here, we were given $1 million for a point source pay for success. So we used the nutrient credit exchange that exists in Virginia for point source discharges from wastewater plants. And we put out RFPs and we bought the cheapest nitrogen credits you could buy. The weighted average in the final outcome was $8.58. The median was $10. Maryland did something similar, only with a wider source of. It was under the Maryland Clean Water Commerce Act, so it wasn't just for stormwater for wastewater plants, and they again were an order of magnitude more expensive. This data came from EPIC, the Environmental Policy Information Center, from the Maryland data. So it just shows you that people are spending different types of money. In Pennsylvania, they had data that was another couple $100. So I mentioned just earlier the Pay for Outcomes project, and this is limited to the Bay program. This was in our budget, and we have a minimum award of $500,000, max of $7.5 million, a total of $20 million. We are giving $500,000 out in small grants, and we're paying for outcomes. So we're not, unlike these other programs where we just reimburse expenses, period. We have an estimate of what the outcome's going to be, but we don't have a guarantee of performance. This is going to be paid as people actually perform. This is the schedule in case you're interested in terms of, what we've been going through this process. It was effective July 1st. We wrote the RFA, had to go through the stakeholders process, and we're out now for people who are working on the proposals. And we're trying to emphasize innovation, not just use the standard practices that are being done. We're open to innovation, new things. We have a technical committee with professors from Virginia Tech and VIMS that'll be assessing the technical validity of it. So I'll stop here and ask questions before I go into the other stuff. Delegate Tran. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the director, is it possible that some innovations in previous years could also be more costly? Like if that strategy is more costly or something? Because I think there's many factors that would go into effectiveness, right? In the workforce world, it might be like who you're serving, at what point in their life, all sorts of things. And I wonder if there's some factors that are not being detailed out yet that might affect that. So when you say you're emphasizing innovation, may that also be more costly in the future?
That's a good question. And the reason we have the small grants is to try to do some small innovative things that may not be the most cost effective, but could lead towards further progress. But we're focusing this particular $20 million based on the budget language on cost effectiveness. So that I have to follow the guidelines I'm given. But in the past, like with SLAF grants, I have been public in criticizing some of them where, for example, we spent some over $250,000 per pound of phosphorus. Gold, as you know, is even now is still about less than $50,000 a pound. And so it doesn't make sense. Or like in Burke Lake in Fairfax County, when you used to have the Department of Wildlife Resources buy phosphorus fertilizer and dump in the lake to make more algae for the fish, to have bigger fish and better fishing, when then Fairfax County is paying me as a contractor to go remove phosphorus downstream at $30,000 a pound. So what we're trying to do is focus people on more cost-effective programs to get there. So which I think is what these questions were kind of directing us towards.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, you had more here, right?
Okay. So ARPA. So I'll go through a bunch of different programs. The first was just, I think everyone here knows what ARPA is. These are the primary programs. And so we've been given different tranches of money. And this is the total awards that have been obligated for all these different tranches. What we're doing now is tracking how the disbursements are going. So, the first goal was obviously to obligate all these funds. The second goal now is to spend them by the end, basically by December 31st, 2026. This shows you an idealized S-curve where we're tracking, actuals versus a theoretical expenditure. We've asked every grantee to give us their actual S-curve that they anticipate. So it's a typical project management tool where we're looking at dollars spent versus when do you expect it. So far, we are ahead of schedule. We are still working, though, on getting a S-curve for every single grant applicant so that we could have a cumulative curve that's more precise. So the next program is the WQF. And so this is a program where, as you know, the eligible projects are basically limited to installing nutrient reduction technology in Chesapeake Bay watershed publicly owned wastewater treatment plants. okay? And also the conveyance of certain wastewater conveyance projects. So, for example, HRSD has been doing some that we funded where they're connecting small, inefficient, ineffective plants with pipelines and pump stations to bring it to a more effective, newer plant with better technology that has capacity. These are the funds, and this program is tracked in calendar years. It's a tradition, I guess. Some are fiscal, some are calendar, and believe it or not, we have a couple under federal fiscal, which is different. So this is the monies that have been given out in the WQF funding program. The next program are SLAF grants, and these were the ones that you saw earlier that are relatively expensive, okay? And these are focused primarily basically on different things that are for non-point source pollutants that tend to be much more costly in terms of capital, but they typically have minimal to no operating costs. So one of the things we need to do in our other grant programs is figure out the operating costs because we don't pay for those. And that's, I said, the apples to oranges thing. So we need to look at this. But this is part of the old history in the Bay program of sectors. Each sector should remove a certain amount of pollution. And irregardless of the cost effectiveness, where some people have espoused the potential of trading between these sectors. So these are the funds that have been spent so far in the SLAF program, or awarded rather. And it's a fair amount of money, and it's proposed to be ramped up. Clean Water Revolving Fund is a much bigger program, and this is basically a loan program for which relatively subsidized rates. We do allow, while a lot of it's being spent in wastewater, it can go to agricultural BMPs, land conservation, brownfield remediation, living shorelines. We have an annual solicitation period every year, and it's a low-interest loan. We actually have principal forgiveness available for some disadvantaged communities. These are the different years and the different amounts of money and the average loan interest and the number of projects funded. Okay. Any questions?
So I'm trying to understand, would it be possible to track the cost effectiveness of these programs so that we can ensure that if we've got, $50 million to spend, we're spending it in a way that maximizes the amount of nutrient reduction we get, as opposed to just throwing money at whatever, some locality is some priority to them because they cut some noisy constituents that want a stream fixed or something?
Right. So our plan, is, based on the money we just got July 1st, is to actually hire staff that will actually start doing that. And we're going to change the way we track information so we can start having cost-effective information. Right now, we're not legislatively allowed to require that as the criteria, but the first step is figuring out how to get the data and collecting the data and analyzing it and presenting it publicly so that we see what's most cost-effective. And that's first step has never been done, and it just hasn't been a practice.
So, Director, you don't think you need statutory authority to either gather that data or require it to be part of the application process?
We don't think that we need statutory authority to do that, to collect the data. What we do need statutory authority is to require that as the criteria for awarding the grant.
I got it, but I think what you said was we don't even have the data to figure out if that works yet or not, or how that would play out if we required it, right?
So we have imprecise data right now, and it's not collected well, but what we can easily do is simply ask people we already asked them for the number of pounds of nitrogen phosphorus. What we're not asking for is the operating cost side, and that's the problem. We've got some of the capital cost, but not the operating cost. So we just have to ask that information, and even if we can't always get it, there's a lot of good data out there that could give us in the right ballpark.
Right, but don't you agree that somebody else could come along as DEQ director when you're gone, and that could just be abandoned if we don't put it in code that has to be part of the process?
Right. That I think your delegate agrees with me. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Anybody else get my drift? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Helpful information. Thank you for presenting that.
You're very welcome.
All right, and we got last item on the agenda, update on the State Water Resources Plan of 2020 by Weed and Clow, and I guess, and so the commission's aware, the members are here. This item was suggested, I think it was by Bud Curtis, I think, because this is the plan has to be updated, what, once every 5 years or something like that? And there's one coming out, and he thought it would be a good thing for us to get a report on it, so that's why you're here.
Yeah, well, hey, good afternoon, Senator Serville, members of the commission, colleagues, and friends. Yeah, I was instructed to prepare a briefing on the 2023 Virginia Annual Water Resources Report. So, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to provide an update on the plan because the plan is a semi-decadal or decadal event, and we are in the midst of we're in the actual inception and beginning of the updated regulation that just became effective 2 weeks ago, which I'll be speaking to today. But I will be providing you with a update of the Virginia Annual Water Resources Report from 2023, which is a flagship product of our agency's Office of Water Supply and represents our water supply planning and analysis team's hard work on obtaining, compiling, and summarizing the state's water resources data. The State Water Resources Report is submitted annually in October of each year to the governor and the Virginia General Assembly and summarizes reported water withdrawals from the previous calendar year, identifying water withdrawal trends and providing updates on the Commonwealth's water resources management activities. This is, like I said, a pretty big effort of our team. Last year, we were able to reach out and we were able to obtain 1,174 facilities to report water withdrawals to DEQ. These users are users that are either permitted or unpermitted who use more than 10,000 gallons per day or 300,000 gallons per month, and also agricultural irrigation that exceeds 1 million gallons per month. Outreach begins in earnest in December of the preceding year to users, but users are updating during the course of the year on a monthly basis through our DEQ's comprehensive environmental data system, which we just recently last year shifted towards from our old VA hydro reporting framework. Data reporting deadlines are in January, at the end of January of each year, and it's a race to compile and summarize these withdrawals throughout the spring and early summer. The report summarizes by use in groundwater and surface water in certain very particular categories, and you can see those up here. Agriculture is defined by the report as livestock, hatcheries, or farm use. Commercial is like golf courses, local and federal facilities, hotels and resorts. Irrigation is for crop irrigation for, like corn, soybeans, nurseries, things along those lines. And manufacturing is related to things like paper mills or concrete plants. Mining is fairly obvious, as is public water supply, and power generation is a huge component, as you'll see here, of a use throughout the Commonwealth. These uses, again, are further divided by permitted and unpermitted categories. So basically, I'm going to just kind of hit the highlights of this report, and we can dive into it if you want later on. But the annual water withdrawal reporting summary, again, we had 1,174 facilities reporting, and these combined were 5.26 billion gallons per day, which is a staggering number when I think about it. And I think when I brought this to y'all's attention last year, I used the analogy of the Swift Creek Reservoir in Chesterfield County, which is a 5.2 billion gallon reservoir. So it's equivalent to using a reservoir's worth of water throughout the Commonwealth every day in that respect. However, this huge number is actually a little bit less than the 5-year average of 5.61 billion gallons per day from the previous 5 years. So when we strip out power generation, which is a huge chunk, it's I think it's about 76%. You get the graph here to your right. That would be 1.26 billion gallons per day of everything else but power generation. So when you look at it as a total over the course of the last 5 years, last year represented a 1.3% increase in comparison. The increase was related to public water supply facilities, the increased use with them, commercial use, and increased irrigation, possibly due to the drought situation that we were dealing with in 2023, which actually continues here into this year. Our public water supply total withdrawals were 822.7 million gallons per day, which were very similar, almost identical to the previous year's value. We've noticed a general increase over the past 10 years, and that increase has been attributed to the population growth that Virginia has experienced during that time. Looking just at a couple more summary slides, with and without power generation, you can see that the groundwater is a smaller component than the surface water, but we've seen increases and decreases in both. Without power generation total, we've seen a 1.3% increase over the last 5 years, but we've seen a decline in groundwater use without power generation as well, as industries shift more towards a surface water component for their sourcing needs. And that is reflected in the total surface water increases that we saw last year of 2.1%. Looking at just power generation only, there's been a very reasonably modest decline of 8.2% over the last 5 years. Again, shifting from as fossil fuel generation becomes more efficient with their water use.
Mr. Clough.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I'm not trying not to trigger everybody here up on the dais, but where do data centers fall under the categories up here on ag, commercial, manufacturing, mining?
That's a great question. Data centers would fall under the manufacturing if they were permitted in and of themselves. Right now, they're not disaggregated in and of themselves.
Okay,
they are kind of boiled into the public water supply for the most part.
So my next question is, do you have a sense of how much data centers have contributed to any of the increases that might be shown on this?
Well, within the public water supply, perhaps, but we do not have a definitive idea of how much that particular use has attributed to any type of...
Don't most data centers, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought they, in a lot of locations, they use groundwater to cool the facilities.
My understanding is most of the data centers are using surface water supplies supplied by the public water, whatever the utility is in and of that, wherever they're located.
Okay, but if they were to locate in a place with no public water, they'd have to use groundwater, right?
I'm sorry?
If they were to locate in a place with no public water, they'd have to use groundwater. You don't have any sense of that?
Right. No, I do not. If they were, whoops.
Let me just help.
Okay, hey, phone a friend.
Most of them are using surface water,
okay,
not groundwater. I'm not sure exactly how many. Our staff's assembling information for JLAC right now, but like, for example, one of the more popular topics is a data center water withdrawal. It's a surface water withdrawal, but the majority of the sites or data centers are using public water supply or recycled public water.
I understand a lot, but there's also talk about more of these things popping up in rural areas as they don't care about latency anymore. And
correct.
And I know, for example, Senator Stewart, who's not here, is concerned about one that's coming into the Northern Neck potentially, right, and all that. I'm trying to get a sense of
the three big data center complexes that are new in rural areas that I'm hearing lots of comments about. They're all proposed or existing surface water withdrawals.
Okay.
Just because of the groundwater sources.
Got it. So, and then my other question about this data is, it seems this is the first breakout I saw was just here between groundwater and surface water. Groundwater to me is a lot more sensitive because it's a limited resource.
Correct.
So it strikes me that
Well,
seeing a lot of
both
this,
limited, but
sure. And then I've heard that in Northern Virginia, the DMV area is projected to run out of water in, I don't know, 30 or 40 or 50 years or something, which is why Fairfax Water is going to take a quarry and use it for storage once the quarry is done being used, and there's concern the Potomac might not have enough water at some point, 50 years or something like that. So I agree, surface waters could be limited. Who knows where climate change is taking us and what that means for our rivers. And but we do know the Eastern Groundwater Management Area, at least, is running out of water quickly, and we're trying to deal with that. And so it seems to me like a lot of this data would be useful to see if it were sort of broken down more between surface and ground, given what we know the problems are in the Eastern Groundwater Management Area. So that's just.
we don't disagree with you, and we're working on, we're changing systems that didn't exist in the past.
Yeah.
But I agree with you.
Yeah, okay,
Okay, sorry.
Thanks, Mike.
okay,
All right, we'll roll right along then.
yeah. So you were about to start talking about annual water withdrawal reporting, permitted versus unpermitted, I think, yeah.
I was on the trends in public water supply use. This was just a graph that we had kind of touched on the increase over the last 10 years with a dip in 2020 that while we can't conclusively pin it on COVID, it's attributed to changing water patterns that were during the year of the pandemic. But we've recently, kind of spiked back up, and you can see there's a fairly, steady increase in the past 10 years in the use of public water for supply. So here we are. This is the graph showing the annual water with reporting permitted versus unpermitted, and those unpermitted are either ones that are excluded from surface water regulations because they are grandfathered, or for groundwater, they lie or reside outside of any of the groundwater management areas. There's about a 50-50 kind of split in total groundwater use between all of the different categories as a whole, and in surface water, it's unpermitted uses are still kind of the currency of the day. 76% of total withdrawals that are reported to us are unpermitted or grandfathered. Some of the permitting actions that we've taken over the course of the last year are shown here on this graphic. DEQ currently administers 98 surface water withdrawal permits and issued 15 BWP permits for surface water withdrawals last year in calendar year 2023. And these surface water withdrawal permits undergo significant review and technical evaluation to ensure the protection of beneficial uses and other watershed dynamics that may be apparent in those areas. Groundwater, as of July 1st of 2024, DEQ administers 345 groundwater withdrawal permits, representing a combined total of approximately 41.8 billion gallons per year, or 115 million gallons per day. And DEQ issued 91 groundwater withdrawal permits in calendar year 2023. Just sort of shifting, I kind of touched a little bit on this towards the beginning, but our local and regional water supply planning regulation amendments, which are a functional part of the water supply planning process. These regulations became effective a couple weeks ago on October 9th. And this is the legislation that requires localities plan regionally, establishing the 26 regional planning areas that you see there to your right in the graphic. This was an improvement from the 48 local and regional water supply planning areas that were in the initial regulation, and represent a paradigm shift towards a more collective approach to planning for water use in the next 30 years. We are planning kickoff meetings required by April 7th, 2025, so the team's going to be really busy going out to these different regions. We're in the process right now of collecting contact information for each region in and of itself. We have a guidance document that's in review, and there is limited funding that was made available through our budget to kind of kickstart this process. This is a long 5-year horizon, and these plans will be due on October 9th, 2029. And it's the sincere hope that they will be a improvement and lead towards more, kind of economic, collaboration and water use through those specific regions. Another one of the things that we have going on right now is our groundwater monitoring network expansion, and this was a direct result of some special appropriation from the General Assembly to DEQ. And that was a few years ago, but it's taken quite a while to get to this point because of the just amount of hurdles that the groundwater team had to overcome just to get sites to drill upon. Getting easements and land agreements in place in order to site one of these wells has been a pretty heavy lift, but we're really excited because we have all 20 agreements for the Climate Response Network well sites, and we're finalizing the ones for the chloride monitoring wells. We're under contract with the United States Geological Survey's Water Science Center with their research drilling program. To the right here on the graphic, this is the team in action at Rappahannock County last week at the Washington Radio Tower, working to drill one of those Climate Response Network wells. There have been 11 drilled to date, and the remainder will be put in by spring of 2025. And those 19 chloride monitoring wells in the coastal plain aquifers, like I said, the land use agreements are underway, and we expect those to be right on the heels of the completed Climate Response Network wells. The West Point extensometer is functionally completed. This is a installation that's down at West Point that measures vertical land motion, specifically subsidence and potential glacial isostatic rebound. And we're really excited because it should be operational here, in the next few weeks. And, by fall 2024, they have the instrumentation table set, the drilling's been done, the fulcrum arm has been delivered, all the parts are needed, are in place. They're actually just putting a nice coat of paint on them before they install them. And once that's hooked up and running, it'll start collecting data related to the aquifer, the Potomac aquifer at West Point. It's a pretty cool installation. And then my last slide, I just wanted to kind of give you an update on Senate Joint Resolution 25. This was Senator Stewart's initiative, and to have a 1-year DEQ study of groundwater supply east of I-95. We have a preliminary plan in development. We'll be getting a complete annual model update or simulation from our contractor for 2023 here in the next few weeks. We plan on incorporating economic development and population growth into the projections, specifically the industries of interest. We'll be delineating geographic regions of interest to conduct zone budget analysis, and from that being able to derive relative groundwater availability amongst those regions. And our teams are working on developing additional tools to look at groundwater levels and trends and compiling and analyzing available groundwater quality data that we have on hand to summarize that by the November 2025 deadline. We have multiple discussions ongoing with USGS, our contractor, and DEQ staff. And we were really appreciative of the General Assembly having some additional monies put in to hire full-time staff to assist in the execution of this product. And with that, I will leave you with this slide of the West Point extensometer. That's the 1,420-foot well head right there, the pipe going down into it with the instrumentation table over it, and this will be instrumented out here in the next few weeks, looking really spiffy with its new coat of paint on it, and hopefully we'll be getting some data from it soon. With that, I'll close and entertain any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
I think Mr. Curtis's idea was we ought to get this presentation for you because you're about to come out with your 5-year plan. We mentioned right at the beginning, right? So what's the process on that plan, and
Well, the five-year plan is going to be suspended while we gather the data for the new regulatory amendments that are in place from the regions. Right now, the decision was made to wait until we got all that data in order to review and write the plan based on the best available new data from these 26 regional planning units. So the next state water resources plan will be coming out after the final submission of the regional water supply plans themselves. So we're anticipating a 2030 horizon on that.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. That 1,400-foot well, that's how deep you got to go to get to bedrock, I guess, huh?
That is how deep you have to go to get to bedrock. Yes, sir.
Oh, that's pretty deep. Okay.
It's pretty deep. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I think the only other thing, we technically have to take public comment. I don't know if there's anybody out there to give public comment. Anyone? Bueller? No. Bueller? Okay. Nobody present. Well, I appreciate everybody coming today who came. We might have another meeting in December if we can get people to commit to come. We do have a few items to act on, I think, some ideas from today, a few other things we didn't act on that were at the beginning of the calendar today, and appreciate everybody coming out. Thank you. The meeting will be adjourned.
The Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.